Lance, first of all, okay, welcome back in. I'm excited to talk to you, man. So you're with Greenflower Media, VP of Marketing. Tell me about Greenflower Media. You guys are all about education in the cannabis space, right?
We are 100%. This company was founded about 6 years ago by a friend, longtime friend in the industry, Max Simon, and his partner Stephanie, business partner. And they got into it just on the premise of educating by way of blog and video and summits. And it really, over the years, blossomed into being a true education first platform. And so I've been following them for some years. To be honest, they started this around the time that Ricardo Baca and I were working the cannabis out in Denver, and just saw the progress. And one conversation led to another with an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So it's all about education, cannabis, and media. So it was a trifecta. It was a trifecta, I'll say, as far as opportunity.
It's funny you mentioned that because I met Max years and years ago too. I mean, maybe not as long as you, but probably 5 or 6 years ago now at a cannabis trade show. I was with a different company as well. So it's like he's the one that's been able to stay at one place. We're the ones that are kind of bouncing around. So that's great that you found them. Give me a little background, I guess, on what Greenflower Media does. I know it's really, they've grown to cover so many different training methods in the space.
Yeah, substantially. And one thing that's interesting, just reflecting right quick on the growth, and a lot of friends are surprised when I tell them that we have 45 employees, though we're not technically a small operation. A lot of people still assume that it's 5 or 10 individuals that are running the show, but we're pretty well established. And part of that come with that primary focus on education, because as you know, creating curriculum is quite a heavy lift. You have obviously the production via video, but you also have a lot of the contextual assets associated with that too. So we have a phenomenal team. I'm actually at our headquarters right now. A few of them are in here. We're practicing social distancing and in most of the team. But that's really been our focus. We have 10 primary certificates right now that are currently available. And one we just launched on, it was extremely excited for. We've had great success so far out of the gate, which is the Advocacy Certificate, something that we did in partnership with the folks at Normal, who have been around, my gosh, since 1970. And not to go on a tangent, but funny story if you guys get a chance. Keith Strope, another friend in the industry who started Normal, started that with a $5,000 grant from a Playboy tuition program. That was quite interesting. But anyway, they're very much a reputable organization, and so we're stoked to launch that. But that's really our focus, is putting out this content. We did recently shift to more of an enterprise because we found a lot of companies, not naming any names, but there are several that have been reaching out saying, we've tried to do in-house curriculum on our own. We've tried to come up with our own educational content, and it's a job in itself. And they recognize that just coming up with the content can be a full-time job. Never mind the fact that you have to have a learning management system to house it and to facilitate it. So all of a sudden it becomes a heavy lift for any size company. So we've really put that more so emphasis on enterprise, taking care of, our fellow companies in the industry when it comes to education.
Now, for those of you who don't know Lance, he's the VP of Marketing at Greenflower Media right now. Again, you can check out Greenflower at green-flower.com to check out their website, see what they're all about. But Lance, I consider you like an encyclopedia of cannabis industry information. I mean, you're always on the RSS feeds and kind of figuring out what's the latest and greatest in information. Could you give us a little context about your background in the cannabis space?
Yeah, definitely. As far as the legal industry goes, first got my stint out at the Cannabis in Denver, Colorado, in your neck of the woods. And, that was a segue from mainstream media. So I had been with Scripps Media for some time, and then that company is owned by, of course, Digital First Media. So that was really my gateway to the legal side, which was quite interesting because when it comes to media, it's really kind of the Switzerland of the industry, right? Segregate. It's not, I only dabble in grow side of the operation or in logistics or lab or retail. When it comes to media, just like the folks you interview, it's across the spectrum. It's really everyone from all aspects. So that was very beneficial for myself, just getting to know folks in the industry. From there, moved on to Weed Maps and was head of media there. was helping build up their marijuana.com domain, which is their news site, and was quite a good time as well. But the background with my association to the plant does go quite far back, and just growing up in Northern California, Marin County, right next door to where the Waldos came from. I was in San Anselmo, a little town next to San Rafael. Definitely, it touched me because it was a part of the culture, in the Bay Area. And those familiar, we've had this discussion before. Those familiar with the Bay Area, it's always been an element. Even in its heaviest days of the DARE program in the early mid '80s, cannabis was still prevalent in Northern California because that really was, and to many extents, still the culture and the craft epicenter of cannabis. So it was around me when I was younger. Something I didn't even start sharing until about a year ago in an interview with interesting enough, a group out of San Rafael, was that cannabis was a part of what helped me be able to afford to go to college. So I did dabble in the what I think we're calling the legacy market now. But I was in the traditional market a little bit, and again, the irony of being able to save up some money to go study criminal law in college, it doesn't escape me at all. Obviously not a path I pursued, but I couldn't be happier with where I am, because being a cancer survivor, that's really my advocacy position on legalization of the plant, and not just domestically, but globally, quite honest.
And a hot button topic has to be education in the industry. One of the things that you've spent so much time educating yourself on is now one of the things that I think has been making you such a valuable commodity to all these companies that choose to bring you on. I guess tell me overall why the topic of education, like what Green Flower is looking to do, why is that so important right now with where we're at in the space?
Oh my gosh, there's where to start, right? I mean, we're in a very, very interesting time, and not just industry specific, but obviously globally, from the equity conversations to equality in industry, which is something that's been a topic within the cannabis industry for years. While I did see what I thought was more so diversity within Northern California that is not predominant around the country or around the world. Education is key, because education is empowering. So rather be, again, having a program that talks about advocacy and how to support, things like fair banking rights and again, equity programs, but also just education and preparation for legalization. I actually was a moderator of a panel in January in Las Vegas at a convention. And that was one of the things that I asked a great group of individuals, all respectfully, very smart and well-educated in the industry as well. I said, what do you think legalization is going to come into play at a federal level? And my answer was 2022, and in most of the 4 or 5, I think it was between 2022 and 2024. So with legalization being inevitable, more so than ever education, especially education around things that have to do with compliance and rules and regulations. And that's really where our focus is going to, more so the back half of this year, is focusing on things to make sure that from sanitation, proper handling, to logistics and distribution, to retail packaging, making sure that people understand the compliance that's needed. Because let's face it, there's several people and companies in the industry that have come under scrutiny because of not following some sort of compliance or regulations. I really respect Canada and how they follow GMP and how Health Canada holds the LPs accountable. We're also seeing that in Europe with eGMP being applied both in Europe and in places like Israel, Australia, even South America. So while we might have the craft and the culture down and have the trendiest triangle strains you could imagine coming out of the U.S., we're a bit behind when it comes to certain elements with respect to education around, again, compliance and regulation. And that's applicable to not just the company as a whole, but to the individuals within that entity, to make sure that they're properly educated on how to handle, how to process, et cetera.
Now, coming from the old school cannabis market, the pre-legalization cannabis market, to where everything is now and where you're at now with the market. I guess you get a lot of people that have transitioned from the black market to now this market, and they complain about the regulations and they complain about having to comply and how it was better before. But those are the same people that were advocating for legality. So what do you say to that? Like, how do you kind of reconcile those two stances? I don't want to put you too much up against the wall, but it's just it's a hard topic to broach. And I know you kind of have been in both camps.
Yeah, I definitely have. And that was a topic that came up quite often working with the Humboldt County Growers Alliance. Obviously, with having a few hundred growers that are up on the hill, as we say, albeit North Humboldt. So, and it is a challenge. And I have several friends that I grew up with that are growers that are on both sides of that proverbial fence. It's tough because the ones that have come out, once you stick your head out of the fence, you can't put it back in. You're identified both as an individual and as a property owner and as a business owner of what you partake in, which is the production of cannabis. Now, one thing that is interesting is a lot of people don't understand some of the growers out there, it's not the only thing they grow. I mean, yes, this is a cash crop, and even in my own backyard in Ventura County here, we have growers that have converted, several crops, including berry crops, which price per pound is quite substantial, as you probably know, going to the store, strawberries, blackberries, etc. They've converted to hemp because of the hassle and headache that's associated with growing anything that looks like or smells like cannabis.
Yeah,
has become a challenge for these guys, and they backed out of hemp production, unfortunately. But it is tough, and there are people that are still lingering in the shadows because they feel that even post-Prop 64, or I should say now, amid 64 via 215 anyway, it's a whole different game. Because the heydays, I'll speak specifically on North House market, the real heydays were in the 2000s, in the early teens, when it was still Prop 215. When these individuals did have the freedom and when they were getting more per pound. Now, don't get me wrong, it hasn't been $6,000 per pound in years and years and years, but $3 or $4 versus a fair market wholesale value of $1,200 per pound right now. So it definitely has changed. The difference between, let's just say, in the illicit market, a pound being sent to New York for, we'll just call it wholesale $2 versus a pound being sold wholesale here domestically in the legal market. When you do add up all the taxation, because keep it in mind that this plant is taxed several times from seed to sale. The grower alone is taxed multiple times before this even hits the truck while it's still in the ground. So when you net things out, or as we say, when you net, so what is the true profit? Unfortunately, it is less. And then on top of that, you have all the hassle with compliance. So it's tough. We want a legal market because, to me, legal equals safety, just on a personal note. And again, being a medical advocate, being a survivor, I want to know what goes into my body. And that I don't discriminate. That includes food and drink and cannabis. But that is the biggest benefit. It unfortunately comes at a little bit of a sacrifice by way of excessive taxes.
Which is interesting because every state does it differently. And Prop 64 has been... I guess multiple ways people have received how it's been viewed in California. And I think most people kind of consider it a stopgap to the next legalization legislation that's going to probably improve on this framework. So hopefully all progress is good progress, but who knows? Now, I want to talk a little bit more about Green Flower Media because you guys offer training, and I want to get into the kind of training. Like, it's training at the corporate level, but you also talk about individual trainings and certifications that people could go through, add to a resume, and then when they submit to that resume to their dream job, now they have these different levels of certifications that basically makes them an expert to an extent, right?
100%. And I had an individual, I'm very active, as is Max, on LinkedIn because we're very much, appreciative of the fact that they are open to cannabis, unlike other Facebook, Instagram, etc. And so I was just on there last night. There was an individual that appended to his title that he was, actually Green Flower trained. And I think that speaks volumes because that's the direction we're going. It is about the individual, not just the entity. And that's really what made us Green Flower, who we are today, for the last 5-6 years, has been that core focus on the consumer. Now, a lot of individuals that are with businesses have partaken in those certifications as well, but that is definitely a strong suit of ours. So we are not leaving that behind. To your point, the focus is all over the place. We have a certificate on CBD. We have a medical certificate We obviously have the Advocacy Certificate. A few that I really like that are phenomenal, not just for the novice or for the individual looking to follow their passions and enter the industry, because we still need you. We need, I tell FedEx driver says something to me, I'm like, we need logistics people. I have a friend who's in HR. We need HR people, scientists, sales, marketing. We're like any other industry where we need that support. But someone saying, oh, I've consumed for the last 10 years, so I know about the plant, it doesn't quite jive, right? Because, just in the conversations we've had, there's so many elements of understanding, and you can break it down into so many different categories as well. But yeah, a lot of it is focused on educating for advancing in your career. And that's exactly it for the end user, just like that individual that added, his education to his LinkedIn description. It does give you a leg up. And a few that I think of in specific is the fundamentals of cannabis course, as well as the business essentials. I mean, if someone gave me these two programs to take 4 or 5 years ago, I would almost be to where I am now on knowledge. I have a little bit of advantage coming from the Bay Area, coming from NorCal and being around it. But you get what I mean about the basic elements of chain of custody and proper production and distribution, proper packaging and retailing, everything around licensing and real estate. All those elements are all covered just within those two programs. So we see a lot of people that are taking those prior to entering or attempting to enter the industry, which is great.
Now, who's creating this content? I go on your website, again, green-flower.com for those listening. Check them out on the website. But I kind of see like a who's who of industry leaders kind of contributing to this content. So what's the process like of creating this content that you're putting out?
Phenomenal question. So we have several hundred industry experts within our Rolodex, and it's interesting. This is the wall of several of those behind me. And this is what impressed me. I'm going to geek out for just a minute, because when Max first tapped me, he really wanted to talk about a partnership between my previous employer, which I still have a phenomenal relationship, great rapport with, love both of them. But originally we were talking about a partnership between companies, because one thing that Max has been excellent about is reaching out to the industry leaders, again, rather be an actual expert like who we have over my shoulder, Andrew D'Angelo, or if it's actually an entity, but bringing those folks in and helping them craft the education around this content. And so when I came up and met with him and we started having the conversations, he shared what he had in mind for me. When I walked over and I saw this wall, I was so impressed, because so many of these individuals I consider friends. I mean, good friends. Kevin Jodry's up here, and obviously you've got, Jared Mursky and the D'Angelo brothers. But that's just to name a few. Those are the industry experts that we lean on, rather be Nick T or Frenchy Cannoli, because we want to educate on old school hash production and new school hash production. So a lot of it is going out to those experts that really have made themselves a master of their respective craft. When it comes to the curating and actually creating the content in-house, we have a phenomenal team. This individual Joe, who's here, he's the head of curriculum and content, and the way that they craft it. And these are individuals that come from mainstream education. I mean, from accredited university background or online education background. So just like I come from more of a background around marketing and media and the industry, they come from that as well. And everyone brings their expertise to put out a phenomenal product.
Very exciting stuff. Again, guys, Lance Lambert, VP of Marketing with Green Flower. If you have a question, go ahead and hit that little question box all the way at the bottom, and we'll answer that for you guys. Lance, in terms of educating people, where do you think the biggest gaps are right now in the current level of education the average consumer has, or the average person trying to get into the industry has? Like, where are you finding that lacking the most?
I think what's lacking is the true understanding of the complexity and diversity. And I would apply that, again, to many aspects. The complexity and diversity of the plant, of the way that you produce and process it, the complexity of the industry. Again, the fact that there are rules and regulations that are specific to states. It's not even a regional element. It's not a national element. But we aren't Canada. We're not Germany. We're not Switzerland. We're not Australia. We don't have that federal support to make sure that we have everything set uniform as far as what things like compliance look like, and things like proper packaging and safety standards, child child safety elements that California's done a great job with. So it's really those things that people don't quite understand. And the level of professionalism is another thing. So I think a lot of individuals, no thanks to Hollywood, they think of Pineapple Express and Dazed and Confused and Half-Baked and, the quintessential stoner and that lazy person, Spicoli ordering a pizza during fourth period class. I mean, that's a bunch of shenanigans. It's just not true. I've met some of the most buttoned up, well-educated, most professional individuals in this industry. And having come from .com and automotive and mainstream media, that does say a lot because all of us take it serious. We all feel that we represent the industry, but the level of expertise and professionalism that should come with that. So I think just people understanding that. The other thing I'll add is a little more personal that many friends, Jodri and I have conversations about, other friends in the industry. One thing we're looking for, and I don't mean this in the Canadian term because they use the term Cannabis 2.0 to reference the, second phase that they had of concentrate release versus flower only. But when I mean Cannabis 2.0, a lot of us are waiting for when it's going to come for the consumer to understand that this race to the top, the highest THC, does not mean the highest quality experience. It doesn't mean the best performing cannabis for you and your endocannabinoid system. Many of people you talk to that are, call us connoisseurs, call us canna snobs, but you talk to them, and some of the most phenomenal cultivars that we've come across, if anything, the THC levels have been in the teens. But you look at the diversity in the terpene profile, because one thing that I constantly say is the cannabinoids are the engine, but the terpenes are the steering wheel of this from an experiential standpoint. So it's very pivotal that an individual has an understanding of both so that they can get the best experience possible by way of consumption. And even if you don't consume, that comes on the education side as a bud tender, cannabis consultant, etc.
Just a couple more questions for you, Lance. I know you're a busy guy, but when you talk about this education and creating this curriculum, obviously, since it's not federally legal, you're talking about 50 different regulatory systems just in the United States. So does that impact the way you guys are creating this media and that training in some states has to be different than other states?
100%. So we're working with a phenomenal gal, Maureen McNamara, whom she owns an education company out of Denver, which is called Sell Smart. And she does a really good job with looking at what those local regulations are, whether it be Massachusetts, Michigan, Colorado, et cetera. So that's been one path that we've taken to date as far as putting a focus on what applies specifically to you in your state with respect to legalization. We are partnering with another entity that will be the first fully ANSI accredited organization in this country that does have rules and regulations established that will need to be put in place to be compliant. And right now, the one thing I'll say as well, people are looking at education in cannabis as a nicety. And within a few years, again, it's going to be a necessity. I really see, although it'll take the feds a while to get things sorted, everyone knows, just like we don't like to compare to alcohol, but there is a similarity with the post-prohibition conversation that as that became legal, we know that bathtub gin went away. High level, rubbing alcohol, essentially, ethanol style alcohol went away. All of a sudden, there were the rules and regulations that came into place that make sure that one, everything was uniform, but two, that there was a diversity in selection for the consumer. So there's a lot of things to be prepared for as legalization comes into fruition. Again, not if, but when. And education is what's going to get the companies there. In the interim, it's really a differentiator. It's what we call in business a USP. You have a unique selling proposition by being able to say that, yes, my team has been fully educated by experts in the cannabis industry on our craft and what we do. So that's one that I think is really going to have individuals that make it through everything going on right now with the pandemic and such that are going to prevail on the other side as far as being successful.
So you have the individual training level, you have the enterprise kind of corporate training level. What's the best way for either one of those or both to start working with you guys and get the ball rolling?
Yeah, great question. So definitely you can reach out online on the website. We have a portal to send in a query for enterprise. Enterprise is essentially a 5 licensed seat or more. I do love the enterprise program for individuals that are business owners. I highly recommend that, having been a former business owner myself of 3 different companies. Wherever you can save money, because a dollar saved is a dollar earned. So I would highly recommend enterprise just because it is a fraction of the price. And it's essentially like most SaaS models where you have a license for a year. So it gives you full access to our library of all educational information that exists as a business. As an individual, same thing, going to the site and looking at what certificates we have to offer is definitely one avenue that you can take as an individual. Another, which I'm excited to share, we just announced this via press release about 2-3 weeks ago, is our partnership with Accredited Colleges. So we're actually working with universities, whether it be Florida Atlantic, the second largest university in Florida, Northern Michigan University, UC Irvine, UC Riverside. We're talking to San Diego. But we're up to about 6 or 7 colleges now where GreenFlower is actually powering their higher education program with respect to cannabis content. So that's another opportunity if you do want to go by way of accredited college and have that as a reference on your resume, your CV, or LinkedIn as well.
Last question before we get you out of here, Lance. What's on the horizon for GreenFlower Media? Obviously, you just mentioned tying into accredited universities, but what else would you want to share before we got out of here?
Oh my gosh, there's so much in what I can share. Yes, definitely continuing with accredited colleges. We love the fact that that side of the spectrum are starting to embrace this as a solution, and looking forward to the first graduating classes coming up here from that program. What we do have in store, again, you'll find that there will be a lot more courses around compliance. And this is something that will be applicable not only domestically, but internationally. That's one thing I really pride myself on. What I was able to accomplish with Boveda and Weedmaps was being able to create more of that international footprint. And talking to friends in South America, or be Chile, down in Brazil, or friends out in Australia, Thailand, across Europe, all of them say that education is needed in their market. So that's one thing that we're working towards, is really expanding this education, because it does transcend. Again, a lot of this comes from where the culture and craft started. Many of these industry experts are based out of Northern California or Southern Oregon for a reason. And so it does translate to an individual in Amsterdam or an individual in East London that are wanting to learn additional insight on this, so they can speak as if they are an expert. So that's what's going to be coming on the horizon, is further expanding our footprint, and then more focus on enterprise and the accredited universities.
Last time, his name is Lance Lambert, VP of Marketing at GreenFlower Media. You can check him out, green-flower.com. Also, GreenFlower Media on Instagram. They're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, I'm sure as well.